Hi, everyone. Let's just do a quick sound check. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, you sound great, Rob. Thank you.
Okay, great. And can everyone see my screen?
We can see that as well.
All right, terrific. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking a little bit about how we navigated, or I should say, how we are navigating this unusual situation. And I'll try to keep it also thematically appropriate to some of the other discussions that are going to happen today. Although I'm neither a technologist nor a finance expert, on the other hand, there's a theme that I guess I'd want to reinforce, which is that I need that one of the most important things that I've needed to be over the last 6 months is not consumed with either of those topics. And so I'll come back to that point at the end. But let's talk a little bit about School of Rock. I'm sure that most of you have seen the movie with Jack Black. I'm sorry that I'm a disappointment. I don't look anything like Jack Black, and I don't scream anything like Jack Black. But what you may not know is School of Rock predated the Paramount movie and predated the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. We've been in business for 21 years, and we're very, very proud now to be delivering lifetime changes for our students. So let me just talk a little bit about kind of what we are. What is School of Rock? And School of Rock is an individual school of rock. What you go in there and you have individual lessons like conventional music in some ways. But the thing that is so different is that we teach through performance-based music education. We put our students into ensembles, and we have them work towards real shows. So they might work on a Beatles show or a Zeppelin show or a Zappa show or Women in Rock or Roots of Rock and Roll, British Invasion, etc. And I'll talk a little bit about how that comes to life. So if you haven't been to a School of Rock, an average School of Rock is about 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. And it'll be a combination of individual lesson rooms and rehearsal rooms and student lounge, etc. And it's a musician's dream. If you walk in there, you're going to see, looks kind of a little bit like my background in our Schools of Rock. So let's talk a little bit about the context for what we were facing as we came into COVID. We were in a very, very substantial growth period. We call ourselves a growing, passionate community. That's part of our purpose. 273 locations. We have about 100 schools in the pipeline all around the world. We're in 9 countries today, but plan to be in 4 more in the coming 12 months. We're going to be opening up in Colombia and Paraguay, Spain and Portugal, and in discussions on several other countries. And it's been fairly breathless these last few years. We've opened 70 locations over the last 4 years. And what's really exciting about our concept, we're a franchise concept. So we do operate some of our schools, but one of the things that makes our concept so successful is we have individual owner operators, and those individual owner operators are incredibly passionate about our purpose and help us real time evolve the concept and perfect the concept as time goes on. So we're enormous believers in the power of entrepreneurship and individual ownership. And it also talks about some of the complexities of our geographic fragmentation, our enterprise fragmentation, data capture, and ensuring that we have an infrastructure to support all of those franchisees, as well as the core brand. So we talk a lot about what are we in the business of? We're in the business of enriching lives. And this is a great example picture of what you will find happening. That is before COVID at your average School of Rock. You see kids who, many of whom will have not met before, some of whom are very shy, who are thrust into this extraordinary learning opportunity where, of course, they're going to get to learn the guitar or principles of singing or bass, keyboard, percussion. They're going to learn music theory. They're going to learn the technique. But what's happening in this photo is what is really the game changer. We're really talking about creating a life enrichment experience for that student. We want them not just to learn to play an instrument. We want them to learn to love learning music for their entire life. And that's a higher value proposition. It's a premium proposition. And in some respects, it cracks open real questions about is conventional music education sufficiently effective? Our view is this has higher degree of retention, higher degree of efficacy, higher degree of impact. And just, you can see there's a comparison of what you might see. You know, we do one-on-one instruction like traditional music schools, but we also do group rehearsals, full band performances, and a whole range of other group activities now, including recording, including songwriting, including video production. And I'll talk a little bit more about how some of that was inspired to a greater extent by COVID. So we're a growing, passionate community focused on enriching lives. And we do that through performance-based music education. So I talked a little bit about our commitment to group play and group learning. But I want to talk a little bit more about our kind of pedagogical philosophy. You know, we start with this philosophy, which is song first. So think a little bit about when you were a kid and you were learning a new skill, a new sport, or you might be learning to talk, or you might be learning to help around the house. Indeed, there might be some elemental discussion by a mentor or a teacher or a collaborator in those situations to explain some dimensions that you need to know. But the reality is most of us learned when we were little by just diving in. We would never tell a kid, I'll tell you what, you can start talking and participating in this conversation as soon as you've demonstrated sufficient proficiency, independently developed through grammar, spelling, sentence structure, etc. It makes absolutely no sense. Music is more like a foreign language than anything, and that's why you see some amazing musicians who are unschooled. Some of the earliest musicians were unschooled. The mothers and fathers of rock and roll were largely unschooled in music theory and proficiency. Many of them, you take somebody like a John Coltrane, the jazz genre, ended up filling in and not only becoming an expert in music theory, but an inventor and an innovator in music theory. So we start with the song. And what's cool about that is that a song is a meeting place between skills, technical ability, music theory, performance, collaboration, and improvisation. So it's an amazing place to center around a methodology. And what we did is we've wrapped around that a whole teaching method, a patent pending a teaching method that includes an app, includes books, includes pedagogy, includes curriculum, includes tools and resources that are unmatched around the world. And our kids come together, and our adults as well, because I'm a School of Rock student. I'm actually a decent keyboard player. I'm a terrible guitar player, but getting better every day, thanks to my teacher at School of Rock. So adults and teachers adults and student and younger students get to participate in national, regional tours and events. We play at places like Bonnaroo and Lollapalooza, Red Rocks, Rock in Rio internationally. And our real focus is preparing students for the stage, but also for life. So, you know, thankfully, I'll just bear with me for just a little bit of bragging and propaganda. One of the things that's been created through this is really, really strong impact in our industry. We're very, very well regarded for the contributions that we make not only to our students, to our communities, but also to our entrepreneurs who participate. So this beginning of this year, we're all sitting fat and happy. If you look over to our left, those of you who are sort of consumer geeks, I suspect there are many on this call. You see a net promoter score of 88, 90% promoters versus 2% detractors. That's a really, really, really strong net promoter score. That puts School of Rock amongst the very best in the world in regards to customer satisfaction. And over to the right is a chart, a very long-term chart. I think it goes back to 2013 of our student count growth. The waviness and the irregularity of the lines is the seasonality of our business. We tend to be very, very seasonally spiky and back to school periods. So that's what you see is the 12-month build, the settling back, and then a build on top of that, and then the world changed, and I'm not going to overplay it, other than to find the ugliest, nastiest, most gruesome-looking version of the coronavirus that I could find. But I still am trying to piece together when those moments were, when this felt very real, when this felt real versus a news story or versus a hyperbole or versus sensationalism. But I did a little bit of digging, and I'll come back to that in a moment. One of the things that the dean and the Interrel team asked for me to focus on is, okay, so what were the more generalizable lessons that we drew that have helped us navigate through this crisis? And there are many, but I think there are 4 themes that emerge for me that have been game-changing for us. One, and a strange place to start, is vulnerability, is starting in a position of understanding what you don't know, understanding and accepting the dimensions that you can't control. The second is really reverting to your institution's purpose and drawing on that for not just inspiration, but for guidance about what is it that you focus on. The third is how you leverage community. And the fourth is speed, which will be of no great surprise to this group. So I'm going to talk a little bit about vulnerability first. And as I said, I did a little bit of forensics to figure out when did it occur to me that we had a big problem. And so I'm going to read this text that I sent to Dr. Nina Shapiro, a long-time friend. I've known Nina for over 30 years and watched her move from being a precocious college student to being a leading authority on pediatrics and an author and a researcher. So I wrote Nina and I said, hey, it's Rob. We're putting together our COVID response and planning. And I was wondering if you had time, a few hours here or there in the coming weeks, to engage as a paid consultant to School of Rock, since having a medical expert would be helpful. Do you have that capacity? How does this work? Nina, being a great friend and also a great physician, leapt on the opportunity. That was February 27th. February 27th. And you can even tell from the tonality of my email, a couple of hours here or there in the coming weeks, just get perspective, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember that night, Nina said, well, let's talk right away. So we are on the phone, and Dr. Shapiro said, I said to her, listen, I'm very concerned over these next few weeks. With this emerging, we might be in a situation where we have to actually shut down, a dozen, 15 or 20 of our schools. And she was silent. And she said, Rob, she said, you'll be shutting down all of your schools. And then she proceeded, as I was, my heart was palpitating, to explain to me the epidemiology, to explain to me how to understand what was going on. and to also indicate that, in a way, in some ways, only a friend can do, how out of my pay grade I was. Thankfully, because this was more than just a consulting relationship and more than just a casual conversation, I had the vulnerability to absorb this message, because it was very clear to me that we were going to DEF CON 4 February 28th. And many of our competitors only started embracing the reality of this 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later. And so thanks to Nina's persistence, and thanks to our institution's vulnerability about accepting advice and knowing what we don't know, we moved into evasive action very quickly. And if it wasn't the next day, it was 2 days later. As a team, we made the decision that within 7 days, we needed to have a remote learning option for our business, and that the magnitude of the situation was such that worst case scenario, some of our schools would be over prepared. But because of that, our team had the clarity and the seriousness of resolve to know that we needed to approach this as an existential issue. And it was, in fact, an existential issue. The second thing that we relied on after vulnerability is, and I remember a very poignant moment where I was alone in a hotel room after having that conversation with Nina. And on my computer screen is our purpose statement. And I was looking at it, and it occurred to me everything that I needed to know about how to mobilize for this situation was already spelled out in our purpose. And I know that this is a little bit syrupy, and I know it's a little sentimental, and I know it's easy to poo-poo, because every company, including many that have gone bankrupt, many that have been indicted, many that have done dastardly things, have mission statements and have purpose statements, etc. But for us, this is a very central part of our culture, and it is an organizing principle about everything that we do. And what it reminded me is that the reason that we were going to put so much energy into prevailing was because we had to. Because according to our purpose statement, we have a dedication to enriching lives. That the mechanism through which we do it is performance-based music education, and we do it as a community. And you see, I mentioned those three things earlier in the conversation. And it regrounded us, and it became a war cry for the institution. And this is what we kept coming back to, because the reality is that all of us at that time were scared. All of us at that time were confused. All of us were had great ambiguities about the vulnerabilities to the business. But what this allowed us to do is get recentered and say, okay, we're going to organize our approach around these things and be motivated around it. And one of the things that has been a bit of a mantra for us in the context of that is what motivates us to be focused on enriching lives, especially with young people, the tens of thousands of students that we have who are young people, is we were already on the front lines of a pandemic, well before COVID. You'll see this is a chart of suicide deaths amongst young people, in this case, 15 to 24-year-olds. We have students much younger than this as well, but suicide deaths for 100,000 people. And you see that the number through 2017 was on a sharp ascent. And, that is a staggeringly large number, and would be a larger large number well before you get to anything like COVID. And as we were confronting COVID, of course, it was an inconvenience. And of course, our children are part of the epidemiology about the spread. And of course, we have adults in our program. And of course, we have adult teachers. And of course, we have people at home who interact with our students. So we had to have the highest degree of concern, as everybody else did, about the public health dimensions of this. But remember, we had a public health problem coming into this, which is that we had kids who were depressed, anxious, and suicidal. And for us, that remained to be a very, very strong focus. If you compare this, my state, I think I'll get the numbers pretty close to right. We have cumulatively about 9,000 cases of COVID, of hospitalizations for COVID under the age of 19. And we've had, I believe, 0 deaths under the age of 19 in Massachusetts. It's not to diminish it. We've taken this very, very seriously, and we continue to take it seriously, and there's a lot of unknowns. But the point is, our pressing institutional, societal objective was to preserve the enrichment of the lives of our students. And that helped us mobilize more quickly, more fervently, more collaboratively, and with a higher sense of desperation and focus. And that also made us turn to our community. We got everybody organized around not just implementing a technical solution to do remote learning, online individual learning, but also harvesting technologies like Zoom, Facebook Live, and other one-to-many and many-to-many tools, specialty tools, to have artist sessions, to have students working on music videos, to have students working on recording projects. And most of these ideas and most of the executional strategies around these ideas emerged from our community. And in a very, very strange way, we have never had better communication amongst our enterprise. We have never had better brainstorming, best practice sharing, energy, innovation, invention. And what was amazing about it is that we attracted the attention of industry partners. So a lot of our industry partners came together and helped us, the music publishing business and the record labels and the instrument manufacturers, and of course the artists like the folks here. We had dozens and dozens of artist sessions, very generous by artists who shared their experience with our students and really helped to preserve their intensity. The other thing, and this is intentionally an eye chart, but we moved very quickly to an approach that was anchored on the principles of speed and independent decision making. What was very clear is that we needed to have the fewest, clearest, most conservative policies. In conservatism, of course, in terms of the risk to the business and risk to our students. We established, well before there was clarity from the CDC, well before there was clarity from the US government and from most states, our own phases for how to approach closing, how to approach opening, reporting status, cleaning preparations, and we effectively rebuilt the entire operations strategy of our business in a matter of days. And we did so, the speed was enhanced in a few ways. One was relying on the community for ideas and questions and co-creation. We literally submitted incomplete documents to our franchisees and said, help us edit this. We're going to write this stuff together and pitch in your ideas. But then, of course, the entire way capitalizing on the resources of Dr. Shapiro, Society for the Prevention of Teenage Suicide, and other organizations, our insurance carriers, our health plan providers. We moved to provide employee assistant program, a psychological phone counseling available not just to our employees, but also offering that to the entire franchisee community. We moved to daily huddles with franchisees. We called them office hours. We had daily huddles with our management teams, et cetera. But we moved into action to create the opportunity for people to make decisions quickly. I want to go back to a slide here, and then I'm going to open it up for questions if anybody has. I want to just remind everybody what it is that was the areas of focus. So vulnerability, being focused on what you don't know, hungry for what you don't know, assuming you know less than you do, assuming what you know is no longer relevant, and aggressively filling that expertise gap in with the open-mindedness and trusted resources. Re-anchoring in your purpose, understanding the why of what you're doing. That's always going to be a higher degree of motivation than the what. Turning to the community, co-creating strategy, and in part to create speed, but also with a bias to speed, is moving very quickly. We started referring to things as COVID time. One of our mantras was 1 day equals 1 week. 1 day equals 1 week. So whatever you think is going to happen would typically happen in a week is going to happen a day. Or the amount of beta, the amount of risk, the amount of ambiguity, the amount of uncertainty embedded in our business that might otherwise occupy a full week is going to be occupying an afternoon. I hope those are helpful. That's a helpful architecture for people to think about. Now, what are the results? The results are we've managed to preserve the majority of our business, both in terms of student count and in terms of revenue. We have managed to maintain the integrity of our team in terms of capacity and headcount. We had to move on a few furloughs. Thankfully, we'll be bringing our furloughs back in the coming days. Of course, there were sacrifices. The management team took and the corporate team took meaningful reductions in compensation because that was the appropriate thing to do as our franchisees were suffering and navigating through their own challenges. We provided relief to our franchisees in a range of forms. And the result has been remarkable. We are growing again. The depth of the crisis for us was August 3rd. We are now, thankfully, thousands of students back from that bottom and on a very stout sequential growth rate that's helped by the seasonal trends in terms of back to school, but also is a real tribute to the remarkable nimbleness of our instructors, of our students, of their parents, our staff, our franchisees, and of course, the corporate team. So I would be lying if I wasn't extraordinarily proud and I feel like screaming from the mountaintops. I have no illusion that we figured it all out. Certainly this has been a setback for our business. This has slowed down our ambitions to have every student in the world, to have everyone learning music. But it's only reinforced our zeal about our purpose. It's only bonded the team together more. And it's only reinforced our confidence in the concept, because if we can survive this, we can survive anything. Think about it. This was a concept that it didn't just attack individuals. It attacked society. It attacked the whole social infrastructure that we have. And for those reasons, we needed to abandon virtually everything that we needed to do, or that we typically did. So indeed, if we can survive through that kind of trauma, we can survive through virtually anything. So I'm going to now unshare my screen and then open it up for comments and questions. Dean, of course, you are a insider to this story, and Dean and I have a great friendship and business partnership in addition to being interested in today's material. So you're certainly welcome to chime in and interrogate me as well.
Oh, well, thank you, Rob. I mean, that was excellent. I think, the thing that jumps out of my mind is, because a lot of the topics today are, a lot of it will be around planning and forecasting and, enterprise performance management. So the two things that jump to my mind are, you don't have to talk about tools and technologies as much as what level of effort did you go through to do the scenario planning, or did you sort of bypass that and go straight to the solution you knew had to be there because you didn't have time to do all the financial lifting, if you will? And then the role of the private equity company, were they just a passive during the process? I mean, obviously a huge stakeholder. Just curious at how, if and what level they had a role and importance in the process.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing me back to the first question, because I wanted to make a fine point of that, which is that when people talk to me, I'm a marketer by background, so I'm on the more marketing operations, merchandising side. I fancy myself, sufficiently articulate to talk about systems and ERPs, financial systems, cloud services, etc. But the thing that was really clear to me, has always been clear to me, is that what you want your technology infrastructure to provide, especially in a circumstance like this, is automation, precision, security, reliability, flexibility, and interoperability. I needed all of those things because, to your point, Dean, we moved very quickly to scenario planning, and that requires automation. I mean, you can do it all on Excel, but the reality is that we needed the stoutness. In our case, we use NetSuite. We're a long-term NetSuite user. We're a very satisfied NetSuite user. And of course, we complement that with other tools and other things that are more specific to our business. Our point of sale system that is very peculiar because of the nature of our business. But it was critical for all of that to not require invention, not require customization, not require rewiring, but just to work. And so what I could do is preserve the gray matter from our accounting team, our finance team, our IT team, much more around scenario planning, strategic planning, FP&A, as opposed to us huddled around a table trying to reconcile payables. Now, there are people in our team that have to do that, but thankfully, they have deep expertise and capability, but they also have the power of our systems that make sure that they have enough time to also stay above the fray and say, okay, well, payables are important, but cash flow is actually even more important. Receivables are important, but cash flow is important. So let's make sure that we're reserving the time to make sure that we can forecast out, say, what decisions do we need to make? And in some ways, it's an analogous situation with our private equity firm. I've been very blessed. I've worked very closely with two private equity firms. When I was at Edible Arrangements, I worked very closely with Catterton, which is a terrific enterprise, and then Sterling Partners, Sterling Investment Partners is our private equity sponsor, and they were extraordinary. They have been extraordinary in many, many different ways. They created, some shared insights in regards to best practices on safety, best practices on navigating and understanding the regulatory environment that was emerging, which is very relevant for our franchisees. They were a source of steadiness and calm. We could do some best practice sharing across portfolio companies. And then, of course, when it came to doing the hard work of scenario planning, capital planning, cash planning, and then financing decisions, having an experienced group of people who have navigated through dozens and dozens and dozens of crises in different scenarios, none like this, but all that had elements to bring to the table. So I've been very blessed. I've been very lucky. And, I know that there's lots of different experiences people have with private equity, but these guys have done an amazing job thinking about this as a 100-year problem, not as a 100-day problem.
Great, thanks, Rob. There's one question on chat. Robin or Edward, is somebody going to take that, or do you want me to read it?
I can take it. So here's a question from Terry Longjoy in the audience. Can you elaborate on remote learning and how you feel it will or won't affect the brick and mortar in-person student counts in the medium and longer term?
Yeah, that's a great question, Terry, and it's fascinating. Is that we did have a moment in the first few days or weeks of this of true panic, which is that there's a risk. We're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't here. If we reject reality and say the only way to learn is in person, then we'll go out of business. If we embrace reality, we put at risk the whole premise of what we do. I think necessity helped reveal what we think is the middle way and the truth. And the truth is that there is nothing that can replace the quality of in-person teaching and group learning when it comes to music. It's a little bit like saying, are esports going to replace soccer or football? I think that they complement each other. And so I think that if anything, I think what we're seeing, given the stoutness of our business, the fact that we have schools that are growing, that have more students today than they did last year, that what it's reinforced is the power and the importance of the socialization of the individual instruction, the hearing the tonality, the seeing the fingers on the fretboard, not just hearing. This is a big difference when you're in a lesson and you're doing this or you're doing this. For those of you who are guitarists, you know what I'm talking about. So I think where we land on it is that we think embracing it gives us a colossal business opportunity. We're going to preserve the core of what we do, but all of a sudden now we are not geographically bound. All of a sudden, our schools no longer have to confine their students to their geography. All of a sudden, students who have a cold or the flu or on vacation or going to camp or moving or traveling because of a divorced parent or need have an inconvenience or the car's broken down can still have a lesson. And all of a sudden now we can also collaborate remotely on some things that are actually really inconvenient to do at a physical school. It's awkward to have 20 kids sitting around a computer doing sound recording. So doing sound recording, videos, artist sessions, etc. So we actually come out of this feeling very optimistic that we have the best, kind of a best case scenario is that we've proven the resilience and the power of in-person learning. And we've now added this additional weaponry to our arsenal. You could call that CEO, optimism, but I think we have actually a lot of data to support it.
That's great. Very interesting. We had another question come in. What's the biggest positive change that you'll have coming from this pandemic?
Yeah, I think there's an easy one. That's an easy answer, believe it or not, which is that we have never been aligned as a community as we have. We've never felt closer. We've never felt more committed to each other. We've never finished each other's sentences better. We've never felt more comfortable challenging each other. And we've never felt more comfortable returning authority to the far reaches of our organization. And it prepared us. It strengthened us. I think about in the context of all of this social unrest about racial justice, I think that we would have been somewhat unprepared to respond to that dialogue had COVID not come along to bond us together, because what it put us in a position to do was we reached out to the community and we said, who's passionate about this? Who's educated on this? And who has life experience that they can bring to it? And as a result, we're going to be bringing to not just our own community, but to the broader community, a massive piece of kind of research on the origins of rock and roll and the power of the Black voice in having invented rock and roll and created rock and roll. And we did that so fast and so organically and so true to our spirit, because we'd fused this war stance with our community. So without a doubt, that in my mind is the most long lasting, and I hope it persists. I think it will.
That is awesome. Yeah, it's very clear throughout your presentation that community is an integral part of your business. And I think that comes through loud and clear. So thanks for sharing that. Any other questions from anybody for Rob? Okay, it doesn't look like any other questions have come in. So thank you, Rob, so much. We appreciate your insights, and we appreciate hearing how School of Rock has pivoted.